Hi guys, Jasmo here, and today I'm gonna be talking about boss killers, specifically about boss killing characters that can be ready and prepared for tackling the hardest bosses, or at least like Shaper Guardians, Elder Guardians, Shaper and Elder at the end of like day 1 or day 2 of the league launch. So I've been testing a few builds. I leveled a ton of characters, a ton of different characters, just to have separate characters that I can try this on and compare all of these builds together. There has to be a little bit of a disclaimer, like who this is for. This is not for like an average casual player, I think, even though an average casual player will still find these builds very, very strong once you invest into them. The way that this is supposed to be played is on like the end of day 1, day 2 for someone who really wants to push very quickly to the bosses, to the Shaper and to the Elder, and do them as quickly as possible on a very, very limited budget gear. The setup that we are going with is basically multiple characters that have level 85. If I have a higher level, I just simply do not allocate the passives, so I'm only allocating passives for level 85. I studied so many builds. I went to POE Ninja and looked back at the timeline and looked at what kind of equipment you can have available at like day 2, for example, right? And that's what I was going for. Like, what are the best items you can have at day 2 if you're pushing, if you know what you're doing, if you're searching for the best things, what kind of an equipment you can have. This does not include a single 6 link. So all of these builds, the requirements are like, it has to work on like level 85 already. It has to work without a 6 link, so we can use maximum 5 link. And it has to work with gear that other people already had on day 2 in this league or in the previous league, right? If this is not something that you can obtain at that time, that automatically disqualifies the build. And basically, this means that we are limited to certain builds that would work just on a very, very limited gear. Another disclaimer, these builds you will see sometimes can be like extremely squishy. There are a couple of builds that feel less squishy than other builds, but the builds are really, really squishy compared to what you normally would do, because you're gonna be doing content that is way above what you should be doing like at the end of day 1 or day 2. So the builds are squishy. The builds are also mechanically challenging. The reason why these builds are mechanically challenging is because they take advantage of a lot of mechanics. This is not like press one button and forget builds, because you simply cannot do that. There's nothing that is so overpowered that just allows you to press one button and melt bosses, or with no gear, with nothing, like with no levels or anything. So the builds are mechanically challenging because you need to take a lot of you need to take advantage of a lot of things. You need to use multiple hotkeys for your main skills and also for debuffing the enemies. There are a lot of different ways that you can debuff the enemies that actually multiply your damage. That's why they are extremely crucial to that. And I came up with a list of 4 builds that I tested so far, and I'm gonna tell you everything that I think about them, who they are for, what they are good at, and what they are bad at as well. So the first build that we have here is a Hierophant, Elemental Hit, Ballista, right? Hierophant, Elemental Hit, Ballista. You might think that this is a meme, but actually this build is better than 90% of the builds that you can play for this purpose, right? For bossing early on. The build basically revolves around putting your Elemental Hit, Ballista Totem support, elemental damage with attacks, and combustion into Frostferno, right? So a lot of people don't know, but the elemental hit that grants you added damage, it scales with levels, number 1, and this helmet gives you +2 levels to socketed fire gems and +2 levels to socketed cold gems, which means it gives you +4 to the level of this gem. Oh, also, by the way, another requirement, we did all of this on level 19 gems, right? So max 5 link, level 19 gems, level 85 passives allocated only, right? Those are the requirements. So really, really bare bones minimum. Normally when you do these things, this content, you would have a 6 link, you would have level 20 gems or level 21 gems even, you would have better gear, you would have level 90 plus, but we are going with something super, super early. Like if as soon as some people have reached the Guardian maps, I'll be able to buy it from them and run these Guardians and run Shaper and Elder no matter what, no matter how low level I am, because of this preparation. So again, back to the Elemental Hit. So we get +4 levels from this, and then we've got also level 30 Cold to Fire. Not many people know, but the Elemental Hit actually applies all of the added damage at the same time. It chooses which element or which damage you can deal, but it gives you all of the added damage at the same time. Simply 2 of them will deal 0 damage unless you convert them. So you can actually convert them, and we're doing this by using the Cold to Fire, and by also doing Avatar of Fire. So Avatar of Fire will convert 50% of the lightning and 50% of the cold to fire, and this will convert, the helmet will convert, Cold to Fire will convert 50% of the cold to fire. And on top of that, we are also using the combat focus, right? So we're using combat focus in here, and we're using combat focus in here to force only fire. So if we're forcing the fire damage, we're dealing full fire damage, full cold damage, and half of the lightning damage. This is like the most you can deal at that time. The passives are very, very weird, but this is what works. We are going from Avatar to Fire all the way around to these like bow crit nodes and also acrobatics, phase acrobatics. The build is very chill to play in mapping. The placement speed of the totem ballistas is extremely fast, to the point that I was actually wondering, wait, how am I placing 2 at the same time? What is going on? I'm placing 2 at the same time? It's just, no, it's actually that fast that it seems like you're placing 2 at the same time. You will find the gear and you will find the passives in POBs in the description for all of these builds, and also throughout this video I'm going to be showing guardian kills. I'm going to be showing just white phoenix kill on all of these builds, and keep in mind that this is super minimum setup, like I said, like level 85, level 19 gems and day 2 gear that I looked up on POE Ninja that people actually had access to. There are many mechanics in this build that need to be taken advantage of to deal the full damage. Number 1, you need to make sure that you got 6 totems out, right? They are gonna be dying to AoE, they are gonna be dying to hits, you need to resummon them and you need to make sure that you're keeping 6 of them up. You also are going to need to spam Frenzy, because even though we cannot deal damage with the Rune Binder, we can hit. We just hit for 0 damage, and those hits give us frenzy charges, which increase the damage of our totems. Then we also need to make sure that we use the Infernal Cry that covers enemies in Ash. They take 20% increase damage, which is a massive increase. Then we also use Sniper's Mark, which has increased duration, and then we also use Flame Wall for all of these projectiles to fly through. That will apply also extra flat fire damage to our damage, right? This is all of these mechanics together make it so that you're doing a lot of damage. This build, I would say, is probably the easiest out of all of these to play. Well, it's comparably easy to the Trapper build. However, this one is a little bit less damage than the Trapper, which I'm gonna talk about next, but a little bit more survivability. So this build feels still gonna feel squishy. You're still gonna have to dodge around. You're still gonna have to be mobile and have good mechanics to play with it, even though it's a totem build. But it is a little bit more forgiving, and it's one of the easier builds, and it's very cheap to acquire. It has a lot of uniques, but all of these uniques are either really cheap or not actually necessary, right? You can start without having all of these things. However, the first most important thing is the Frostferno. That's by far the most important thing. Then I would go for like the Skirmish, then a Quill Rain, doesn't have to be 5-link even, and then Kaum's Heart, and also Malakai's Artifice that has Summon Ice Golem. The Summon Ice Golem is the only way we can actually have to apply the elemental equilibrium. The golem is gonna die frequently, so you have to resummon it as well. You have to be aware of it. That's why this is a difficult and kind of annoying build to play. Like all of those are difficult and annoying to play, don't get me wrong. All of those require a large amount of awareness and mechanical skill to play efficiently at this early stage of the game against all of these bosses. And the Ice Golem is like the only thing that can deal damage, because we, again, cannot deal damage because of Rune Binder. So in order to apply Elemental Equilibrium, we need to use the Golem. And it also grants us accuracy, and we are using a bunch of items with accuracy in order to get 100% chance to hit. When we summon this, do I have also... Okay, we've got 98% chance to hit actually. So we need to even increase level of, I think, where is the aura? Precision, level 10. Okay, so we need to level up the precision, and then we're gonna have 98 still. If we level it a little bit more, we get to 20. I was keeping a little bit more mana, but still we use the mana flask, so we actually can do that no problem. We just have like a little bit MOM, that's why I wanted more mana. But that's the first build. I think it's the lowest damage out of all of the 4, but I think it's the easiest to play probably out of all of the 4, and like second tankiest maybe. It's like the second tankiest build probably out of the builds that we have here, largely because of the endurance charges, so it's pretty easy to get the resistances. It has like a little bit of MOM as well. Very, very good build overall. If you wanted to try something like that, POB is in the description. The second build that we have here is a Trapper. It's an ice trap build. This one has very, very, very bare bones gear. This is level 85 again. Gems are only level 19, however they have +4 to them through global modifiers. I looked at, for example, weapons, like how good of a weapons can I have? How good of a belt can I have? How good of flasks can I have? What kind of gear can I have at the beginning of day 2, like day 2 when POE Ninja takes a snapshot? What kind of a gear can I have? And this is it. This build is also based around detonating traps multiple times. So this is not something you want to like completely stack the boss and then it explodes and detonates, because traps explode immediately when the boss spawns. So that means that the boss will have like, I don't know, like 90% damage reduction for a second, and then over that first second or 2 the damage reduction disappears, and then we just spam it and do a lot of DPS. It's a massive amount of damage. It's possibly like the second highest, maybe the third highest damage, but it is the squishiest, unless you play with Tinkerskin. However, I was testing 2 setups. I was testing Tinkerskin with the 5 link. I was not socketing one of the gems. I simply used the 5 link Tinkerskin with EB, which is Eldritch Battery, which costs 2 points. I refunded like one of the power charges and it did this, and it was tankier. And it had better mana, and also I was able to put Zealotry, but it was still, even with Zealotry, it was less damage, like way less damage, maybe even like half of the damage that the +2 Tabula has. +2 to Socketed Trap or Mine Gems Tabula is very, very easy to acquire, and it increases the level of your Ice Trap, of your Trap and Mine damage, of your Charged Traps, and of your multiple traps, which is what you want to use even for single target. This, together with Elemental Focus and Hypothermia, deals massive amount of damage. However, this is a build for really, really mechanically skilled players who are really advanced and know how to not die and dodge all of the mechanics, because you're gonna be extremely, extremely squishy unless you play with Tinkerskin and also go for Wind Dancer, which I did not do. This relies on a lot of unstable payload jewels, right? So we have a bunch of unstable payload jewels. These jewels are insane. This is basically 12% more damage. It's ridiculous, and together with Perfect Crime, I have, I think, like 80 something, like 87, 85 or close to 90% chance to deal double damage basically for traps to detonate an additional time, which is really, really massive. Deals crazy amount of damage, however is very, very squishy. You can see in the footage that at some point you might also encounter mana problems if the boss, if the map has like map mods that make the boss really tanky and you run out of flask charges, you might have trouble with mana unless you play again the Tinkerskin setup. So the Tinkerskin is a lot of quality of life. It helps your survivability, it helps your mana sustain, however, and it also gives you more life, right, and evasion, but the Tabula Rasa is much more damage. This is a build I recommend to people who want to rush extremely quickly, like extremely quickly, and have probably the simplest playstyle, because there is not that much that we're doing. We have Frost Bomb that we're, again, not that much. We have like 3 different things to debuff an enemy, but we have a Frost Bomb, which you can place 2 of them because we have the second wind connected to the Frost Bomb as well, so you can keep up Frost Bomb permanently. Then we have also Armageddon Brand that applies the Elementary Equilibrium. Armageddon Brand because it has faster cast speed than Stormbrand. And then we have Bear Trap. Bear Trap is extremely powerful. It's 25% increased damage for the enemy that they take from traps. It limits your trap limit, right? But it's okay, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to reach the trap limit. You're gonna be spamming these traps and you're gonna be at the trap limit anyway, but it's very much worth using. It just increases your damage by a lot, and we have it linked with also increased duration. We have like cast when damage taken, steal skill Skin, increased duration with Bear Trap. I definitely recommend using increased duration with Bear Trap so that the enemies are debuffed for longer. So you just set up the brand, you set up this, and then you just blow the bosses up. It's a very satisfying skill to play. It's definitely very underrated, and if you can find a way to make it a little bit tankier, which probably means going for the Wind Dancer and Tinker Skin, you're gonna have a really good time. However, still the squishiest out of the builds, and not even the biggest, not even the highest damage. The other builds that I'm gonna show in a moment have higher damage than this, but this is definitely one of the easiest to play because you just basically spam the traps and have 3 things simple to cast to debuff the enemy, right? So let's move on to the next one. Next one is the Blazing Salvo Saboteur. This was my league starter in Heist. I really enjoyed it in Heist, but many people, it flew under the radar so much. It was really crazy. People played like ridiculous, horrible builds like Glacial Cascade Mines, which is just, why would you ever play a build that has the damage nerfed by like half in the past few leagues? It literally had like double the damage a few leagues ago, and now it has much less, and people are playing Glacial Cascade Mine for some reason. Don't play Glacial Cascade, it's horrible. Blazing Salvo is way better. One of the reasons why people didn't play it is because number one, they didn't understand the advantage of using Blazing Salvo with mines, which is basically Blazing Salvo deals more single target damage the closer you cast it from. Like if my map device is an enemy, I'm casting it from here, I'm doing way more single target damage because the projectiles are closer and overlapping than if I am here, right? The further they are, you can see, let me just actually take it out and show you how it works. So if we look at this, right, you see how projectiles spread. But if I'm close, you see how close they are to each other, right? Very big difference. So this is perfect with mines also for the reason that you can throw the mines on top of the enemy, and then they're gonna deal much more damage to the enemy because they are closer to the enemy without you having to be so close and dying, right? And tanking it's like face tanking the boss. Another thing about Blazing Salvo, why they are better with mines, is because you literally have to track the enemy as he runs, and mines do that for you way better than any human could, right? You cannot like be perfectly where track perfectly where the boss is with the skill, but the mines detonating will automatically do that, so they will hit way more often and way more accurately than a human could. Totems can do the same thing, but totems cannot be placed as well close to the enemy and also pre-stacked that well. So that's one of the reasons. Also, one of the reasons why people didn't play Blazing Salvo before was because it was bugged and projectile modifiers didn't apply to it. Now, first of all, I don't know what projectile gems you would even use with it, because as you can see, we're not using any. We're using Elemental Focus, Inspiration, Control Distraction, Trap and Mine damage, right? Those are like the most damage that you can have on a 5-link, and then on a 6-link you add something like Charged Mines or something like that, right? For like faster mine throwing speed as well. So I don't understand why you would even do that, but even accounting for that, right? Last league, what I did was I just put GMP in it. I put GMP and I had 3 extra projectiles without the negative multiplier, without the less damage even applying to the skill. So the skill was even stronger before because of the bug, but people somehow didn't figure that you can use GMP and not lose any damage. But the skill is super strong, and now it got buffed. Also, Scarables were not working for like half of the last league or even more, so it was weaker before, and it was still one of my most successful starters because I cleared all the content, and until I like juiced up my other builds, this remained my boss killer on just this gear, basically this level of gear, which is like day 2 gear that you can have, right? We're using the Blazing Salvo, and we're looking at like this in a Tremor Rod. We're also using Count's Heart because this is again early setup, so we're still going for life. Later on you go for low life, and as low life you're gonna have significantly more damage, actually like 40% more damage, because not only you're gonna have 30% more damage from the Pain Attunement, but also as you can see, we have Arcanist Brand here. You're gonna be able to like 5-link your Shavs, very easy for a Prophecy for like 10C, and you're gonna be able to also put here a Blade Blast, which will give you a nerve on top of everything else, so it's gonna be like 40% more damage. So we're using Arcanist Brand, we're using Storm Brand, we're using Bear Trap, and we're using Flame Wall. This is very complicated, this is very difficult to do correctly, and this is very hard to have the timings right. This is one of the most mechanically advanced build, but I believe this one has the highest skill cap, okay? This build has probably the highest damage potential out of all of these builds, but also it is the most difficult to play. It is not the squishiest because it has fairly large amount of HP. We still go for acro, phase acro, right? So we are not the squishiest, even though you will die. This is still a squishy build, but it's not the squishiest of them. But basically the sequence is you stack the mines, you do Arcanist Brand, Storm Brand, Bear Trap, this, you detonate, and then you put the wall again, you detonate again, because you have 2 detonations from the Tremor Rod. I do not recommend using detonate mines on left click if you are bossing, and if you are mapping, you can simply use detonate on right click. I just like hold both mouse buttons and just drop the mines, and it detonates as I'm running, so it's still very, very easy to play. I don't need to like think about it, and then while I'm bossing I can actually use the proper sequence and like stack all of the mines, do all of the debuffs, one brand, another brand, trap, detonate, place the thing, and detonate again, right? And this will melt anything. It's a massive amount of damage. The Arcanist brand that we're using applies Wave of Conviction with Combustion for an additional debuff, so we got minus 19 res, minus 25 and minus 19 to fire res. Then we also have Sniper's Mark, because these are projectiles. Sniper's Mark Mark's effectiveness is not being reduced on unique bosses, so they're better than the elemental resistance reduction hexes. And then we also have Storm Brand to further reduce the elemental resistance of the boss. And on top of that, Bear Trap, 25% multiplier, and Flame Wall, massive amount of flat damage, considering also large amount of projectiles that we detonate multiple times. So massive amount of damage. We're also using Crit Flask on pretty much most of these builds. We're using Crit Flask and Wise Oak. This is an extremely strong build. I definitely recommend it if you want to play Miner. However, you need to be like a mechanically strong player, because you're gonna be able to, you're gonna have to like figure out, okay, how to stack the mines, how many. You're gonna have to have the timings down of like when the boss appears to stack all of this, because again, your mines might expire, so you need to time it pretty much perfectly every time to maximize your damage. That's why this is like the hardest of the builds to play, but I think has the highest damage of them all. So this is like the most damage you can deal pretty much to bosses, and one of the most effective league start boss killers you can possibly play. The last build I'm gonna show is a Summoner. It's a Soul Rest aura stacking kinda hold conversion Summoner. This is level 90, however, the footage that you're gonna see is without all the passives applied. I basically removed like some life and block nodes. I didn't have them during the gameplay, and I was also using, I think, different bone offering and different setup, because there are multiple setups that I'm going to talk about. So this build, out of all of the builds, it might be the easiest to play, I guess. It still has 3 different skills that we are debuffing the enemy with Arcanist Brand. It requires gem swaps as well, and it is definitely dangerous when you're doing it in a Cyclone setup. However, the damage potential and the quality of life in it is very, very strong. It also requires possibly the hardest item to obtain out of all of these builds. Maybe the Frostferno is also a little bit difficult, but I think Soul Rest is like the most difficult item, together with the Tremor Rod, to obtain at the beginning of the league, because they're both a little bit overvalued, because both Tremor Rod and Soul Rest are just very, very good items on a league start. So Soul Rest might be very hard to obtain and might be a little bit out of reach for some people. So definitely I would not recommend this build if you are not good at making currency very, very early on, because that is basically what the build is based around. You cannot play it without it. Before you get it, you're just basically playing a generic Summoner with like skeletons and zombies, right? So this build is based around Soul Rest and Summon Phantasm. I have 2 setups. I have bought 2 of them, but you're of course not gonna have 2 of them. Instead of having 2 of them, you're gonna have to do gem swaps. So for clear, we're using the Summon Phantasm, of course, in both of them, right? We need to have the Summon Phantasm in it. Then we have the minion damage, Controlled Distraction, Elemental Focus, LMP or GMP. I find LMP to be enough projectiles, and then faster projectiles so that the projectiles fly further. So that's our phantasms. If we wanna, let me just quickly do the summoning. You have to do this at the beginning of the map if you actually want them. You have to actually unsocket this if you're using the brand setup. There are two setups that you can use to spawn these, right? You get 20 of them. You can use either the Arcanist brand, which is much safer on bosses. However, in order to pre-stack on bosses, you have to literally take Arcanist brand out and manually have the hotkeys to sacrifice the corpses. Or you can do the Cyclone setup. So Cyclone setup requires the exact same colors so they can be switched in and out. And then let me make sure that we got this flesh offering. No, actually we need the flesh offering here, like that. So the Cyclone setup basically means you're spinning and you're doing this constantly, right? The Cyclone setup is a little bit more dangerous because in order to apply the elemental equilibrium, we either need to use the frost bomb or we need to spin a little bit on top of the enemy, right? But this is, for example, if you have like issues with your specters dying, this is gonna heal your specters non-stop through the use of the life from death, right? Minions recover 4% of life on minion death as you are summoning new phantasms. When you are at max, the old ones are dying and they're healing all of your minions. So this build basically relies on stacking these phantasms. These phantasms deal spell damage, projectile damage, and it's physical. We are converting it to cold through Triad Grip, and then we're using Skitterbots with Bone Chill. We're using Zealotry, again spell damage and crit. We're using Carrion Golem, which should actually have Culling Strike in here. I just leveled it up. It was dying a little bit. I think Culling Strike here would be like the best thing. And then we're using Hatred as well, because that's one of the main ways we're scaling our damage. We're using Frost Bomb, and we have Avatar of Fire. So that Frost Bomb deals fire damage, but it actually applies the cold exposure still. This is, I think, the most complicated build, the hardest to set up because of the soul rest and because of the fact that you have to kind of switch from what you were playing before. With all of these builds, you're not going to be able to like perfectly level from the beginning in the same way, maybe with the exception of the ice trap, but this build has like the most switches of the gear and stuff that you need to do, and the most trading that you need to do, because you're gonna have to buy jewels, right? So there are jewels that have like minions. You're looking for like dexterity, because you're gonna need a lot of dex to be able to use hatred, for example, to be able to use desecrate. You're gonna need a bunch of dex for also like lesser multiple projectiles, faster projectiles, cold penetration, hypothermia. So for single target, by the way, for single target you have to swap Predator, you have to swap cold pen, and you have to swap hypothermia, right? So this would be the normal setup. These don't need to be linked. That's why this build is also one of the starter builds, right? That's why I considered it, because it doesn't need a 5-link even, doesn't need a 4-link, like only 4 links, I guess. That's all you need. You only need 4 links. So faster projectiles we swap for hypothermia. We put cold penetration instead of LMP, and then we put predator support instead of controlled distraction, and that is our single target setup, right? And we have to make sure that we're also using the signal prey together with sniper's mark for maximum damage, as well as the frost bomb to debuff the enemy. This is a really large amount of damage. This was, I think, like, it's way easier to deal damage with this one than with the miner. However, if you execute the Blazing Salvo mines perfectly, the Blazing Salvo mines deal more damage, right? They can melt bosses quicker. However, this one is a little bit easier to do. I think that personally, it's easier to use the Cyclone setup. The Cyclone setup is like much easier to use, but I prefer the Arcanist brand setup actually. The Arcanist brand setup allows you to deal also more damage, because it also gives you Blade Blast, right? The Blade Blast will also deal fire damage, so you only need to basically put the Arcanist brand on the boss, and then you debuff it with the where is it? We've got the mark here. Yeah, you have to debuff it with the mark, you have to debuff it with the curse. There's like 4 things, right? However, the mark, the signal prey, is instant cast, so you can pretty much do it at the same time as you're doing the sniper's mark. So if you're doing it at the exact same time, that basically takes like whatever the cast time of this is, which is like 0.3 seconds, and then you get like 0.3 seconds as well here. It's a very complicated build, right? It requires so many things. It requires a lot of jewels, right? You're gonna have to search for these jewels and you're gonna have to trade for them. But I think it is the strongest one of them, in my opinion, in the hands of a competent player. If you're able to set this up, I would say this is the strongest one. And this is probably going to be my league starter for the next league, unless it gets nerfed or patch notes change or patch notes buff the miner somehow, or the trapper, or maybe the totem build. So these are 4 builds that I am going to be considering. I'm probably going to be practicing the most with the summoner, and you have to practice like the transition of how to level the summoner and how to have all of the passives that will actually work with the phantasms. So you might actually, for example, try leveling with SRS as well and see if you can make that faster than the leveling that I showed in my leveling guide. You can find the link to the leveling guide for a minion build in the description, and you'll find all of the POBs for this build, for the trapper, for the miner, and for the totem ballista build in the description. So those are the builds that I would recommend if you want to do bosses early, but keep in mind all of the disclaimers. All of these builds pretty much require you to understand the game and understand the build very well. But I'm sharing this video early because that way you're gonna have a time to actually practice them. If you want to do like boss killing early, I definitely recommend practicing it. Practice leveling the build, practice setting it up, because it's really difficult to set these builds up, and it takes time. And if you don't have any experience with them, they're not gonna perform as well as you would expect them. However, they are way better than anything else that I've seen in terms of killing bosses early on. I mean, I have like level 85 passives, level 19 gems, nothing more than a 5 link or a 4 link, and we are killing Shaper, Elder, and all the Guardians with ease, right? Without dying a single time. So definitely very powerful builds. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/AsmodeusStream to see gameplay of practice with these builds. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.